all of a sudden, this Music City hockey team is looking like a real cup threat. And that's why we're diving into the Nashville Predators on the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're keeping it rolling through our NHL-wide fantasy hockey breakdown on the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, joined as always by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele Roden. And on this side of the microphone, it's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. Shout out to the everydayers, holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. Also, a shout out to Indeed. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Steele, what I need right now is an injection of a couple of frosty cold ones. But before we get to there, we got to talk about this Nashville Predators team, because Barry Trotz swings for the fences, and all of a sudden this Nashville team, not like they were bad or anything before, but now they're very much for real and a threat in the Western Conference to make some real noise and perhaps, Steele, go on a deep run into the playoffs. I don't know what you think about that. I'll let you answer there. However, let me say this. Stamkos, Marchessault, your boy on the blue line, Brady Skjei, a lot to like about what's going on in Nashville, and I want to throw this out there as well early. This is one of those situations now all of a sudden, and all the way down to the goaltending, this is a fantasy gold mine.
This is a fantasy gold mine, and I feel the same way of the Nashville Predators, the same way I feel about the New York Islanders. They have been a dark horse team for me over the last few years, but the Nashville Predators are not a dark horse anymore. And I know a lot of people aren't sold on the offensive production of Steven Stamkos fantasy-wise moving forward, but I'll let them continue to sleep on Steven Stamkos going into next year, because I'm keeping an eye on him for my fantasy team and what this means for the Nashville Predators offensively, including Roman Josi as well, because he still gets it done. This team is a force to be reckoned with now moving forward in the Western Conference and in their division. This is going to be a very deadly top six group, especially that you still had a very good season from Gustav Nyquist, a very unexpected season. Also, Ryan O'Reilly, the way he performed with 69 points in a full 82 games. He brings that veteran leadership alongside all the other veterans they just brought in, including the players that they had from last year as well. Kicking off number one, though, I mean, the way Filip Forsberg played last year, he elevated his game.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's been times where we've seen him struggle in the offensive zone. We've seen him at times really struggle with numerous amounts of injuries. You know, you go back to last year, only played 50 games. The year before that, 69, 39 in the COVID year. So he's been struggling with injuries on a consistent basis throughout his NHL career. Finally, after it seems like 7 or 8 seasons, he finally plays a full 82 games, and look what he produces. Career high 94 points with a career high 48 goals and 46 assists, 347 shots, which is almost doubled what his career high in shots was as well. And then the peripherals too, 141 hits. He elevated his physicality for the Nashville Predators, 44 blocks. Love the peripherals from Filip Forsberg. I think there's still going to be a lot of GMs out there that are wary to pick him high in the draft board.
Me included.
You included. You know, where he finished last year is I don't think where he's going to land in next year's draft. And again, career high 94 points for him. And a guy who struggles with injury, I can see him sliding down the draft board quite frequently in a lot of drafts out there. Where I would pinpoint him as of right now, I would say a late second round, early third round pick. Even then, I think that might be a little bit low, but I could see, because of, you know, the energy around the Nashville Predators going into next season, he could slide down the board, but he's still going to be such a hot commodity in the offensive zone for fantasy GMs out there. I mean, again, a career high 94 points. Yeah. I don't know if he'll get up to 48 goals again, but 40 plus goals is still in the realm for Forsberg. He's such a talented player.
347 shots. It's just, for me, this is hard, Steele, because I had Josi down as number 1 first, Forsberg second. I flipped them around and then I flipped them back. So I think what it's telling me is it's just my personal opinion. And I've come on here and been wrong about Filip Forsberg before. I actually said last year, and maybe it does hold true, perhaps in certain angles, I said he might be a good sell high target just because of how good he was last year. And I just hadn't seen that level from him before. Is that me taking away from his game and how good he has been last year? Those kinds of numbers speak for themselves. No, it's not. But I just have to say, finding D-men like Roman Josi, not like guys who put up 347 shots and 95 points, go around a ton. But guys like Roman Josi, I feel, are a lot harder to find. And maybe that's a bad angle to look at and why I have Josi 1 and Forsberg 2. But that's just my personal opinion. I don't see Forsberg replicating it. And now there's a lot less puck to go around with shooters like Stammer and Marchessault going. And that is going to eat into his minutes. He had almost a career high in ice time, almost 19 minutes a night. You can't help but feel with some of those big guns in there, Steele, there's not as much puck to go around. So I just don't see it. But you can't take away from 94 points and all those numbers that we just talked about. So Josi's at 1, Forsberg's at 2, but I really don't think you can go wrong with either because back to front, this team looks to be the real deal. And I know we're going to talk about Juuse Saros hopefully sooner than later. But if he can re-find his form from, I don't know, let's say 2 seasons ago, and I know he wasn't bad last year, but when he was putting up those 920 save percentage, 919 save percentage, and we'll get into it, if he can regain that form from 2 or 3 seasons ago, this Predators team is going to be very hard to beat. You're on mute, brother.
Mute button once again. It's been a long day, but this is going to be a very hard team to beat overall because of all the additions they made, getting Jonathan Marchessault, bringing in Brady Skjei, re-signing Juuse Saros, bringing in Steven Stamkos. They add to the depth that they already had, and they were a playoff team last year. So this is going to be a very dangerous team. I do have Roman Josi at the number 2 position. Again, depending on how you want to draft your team, I could see him going ahead of Filip Forsberg if you want a star-studded defenseman on your team. 85 points from Roman Josi yet again. And again, another player that seems to age like fine wine. 85 points in 82 games, very durable player, 151 blocks, 268 shots. He gets it done in the peripheral categories. He gets it done on the power play. So again, Filip Forsberg and Roman Josi are 1 and 2 off the board. I believe both those guys should be taken ahead or in the second round. Filip Forsberg could fall all the way to the mid to late 3rd round, but anything past that, it's an absolute steal in my opinion.
Sure.
Number 3 and number 4 is where it gets interesting for me because it's very interchangeable with Steven Stamkos and Juuse Saros, and we'll have that conversation after the break. But I think a lot of people are still very concerned about Steven Stamkos' fantasy value because obviously going from Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, Victor Hedman, all those guys, still playing with great players in Nashville, but it's just not at the same level as those players in Tampa Bay.
Let's have that conversation after the break just to close out the point on Roman Josi. By the way, I got a sleeper. I got a breakout target on this team as well, Steele. We'll talk about that after the following break, the rest of the top 5 list. But just to close it out on Roman Josi, not that you didn't already cover it very well, 686 points in 909 career regular season games. Somehow, as a D-man, Steele, he has 34 game-winning goals. I think that just speaks to how effective he is on the ice, how much he is important and critical to this team's success. He has a Norris Trophy. You know, I like to bring up the accolades. At 33, you mentioned it. Sometimes when you look at D-men, especially in that age bracket, you have to be a little bit careful and see how much miles are on the body. It seems like more miles on his body means better production. He's playing almost 25 minutes a night still. And that is straight fire from Roman Josi. He's at my number 1 spot. Forsberg at 2, but they're interchangeable. I'm good with either. I'll be good with the rest of this episode, which is going to pop off right after I show some love to our friends from Indeed. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed, your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Listeners of our show right now get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and shout out the show by saying you heard about it on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip and I appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday, especially through the off-season summertime. We know you want to kick it on the beach, kick it at the cottage, but we appreciate
you can take in the pod at the beach. You never know.
You can take it in at the beach. You can take it in wherever you are. So make sure you're tuning in all summer long. Continuing, though, the conversation of the Nashville Predators' top 5 fantasy assets. Two new players make the list because they're 2 new additions to their team. Number 3, I'm going Steven Stamkos above Juuse Saros. And I'm very high on Juuse Saros. I've said this multiple times that he is the second best fantasy goaltender option right there behind Connor Hellebuck. But even so, then the way I like to draft, the way I like to use my strategies, I'm waiting for goaltenders to fall down. Once one goaltender goes, you really do see them start to dwindle like dominoes and fall like dominoes. But
yeah,
I found it more. It's better to wait for goaltenders later in the draft and get a sneaky steal like we've seen over the time and time again over the last 3 years. That's why I'm going with a guy who continues to impress in the offensive zone. Steven Stamkos is a deadly force to be reckoned with. And especially with this Nashville team joining the likes of Filip Forsberg, joining the likes of Roman Josi on the back. And again, it's not going to be exactly the same like he was with Nikita Kucherov and Victor Hedman and Braden Point, but it's going to be very, very close. I mean, these are very, very capable offensive producers, both on the blue line and the offensive zone. Another 40-goal season for Steven Stamkos, 81 points, back-to-back years of 80-plus points. Continues to dominate with the peripherals, 262 shots, 43 blocks, 78 hits. The power play points speak for themselves as well. Had 39 power play points last year. Could definitely see that fall off a little bit. Like you said, the puck is not going to be able to be on everybody's stick at all the time. So he's going to get his opportunity, but there's still a lot to be there's a lot to be passed around in the Nashville offensive zone, power play, 5-on-5, whatever you like. But Steven Stamkos comes in at number 3 for me for the Nashville Predators fantasy assets. He finished 21st at the end of the regular season last year. I could see him falling in that same area as Filip Forsberg, somewhere in the late second to early third. Anything past the third, late third or fourth, it's an absolute steal for Steven Stamkos.
Stamkos in the second round feels slightly high, but I'm not going to totally disagree with you. Where I am going to disagree is just this, and this is just my opinion. With all of these moves, I'm thinking that this team is going to be much better. And that means Juuse Saros' numbers should improve, and he should be also better. I know those are a lot of shoulds. And take this in, Steele. Last 2 years, Juuse Saros has seen the most rubber out of any goaltender in the NHL. Back-to-back years, most shots against. He saw over 2,000 shots 2 seasons ago. That's insane. And I think improving this team in front of him is going to work wonders for his numbers, especially in that win category. So when I'm thinking about it that way and looking at Steven Stamkos, and for sure, the offensive, you know how much I love Stammer. This has nothing to do with Stamkos, the player, and just how I foresee next season going. Maybe those are a couple of cop-outs because I got Stammer at 4. He could definitely be 3. I got no qualms with you having him there whatsoever because why? And this is what I'm really starting to like about this team, Steele. Ryan O'Reilly, winner. Conn Smythe, winner. Marchessault, winner. Conn Smythe, winner. Steven Stamkos, guess what? 2-time Cup winner, and he's got 2 Rocket Richards. So all of a sudden, not only does this team bring in an influx of talent and fantasy beauties, and yes, I do have Steven Stamkos at number 4, 40 goals, 41 assists at age 34 years old. Shout out to Markham, Ontario one time, and the Markham Waxers. This guy is obviously the real deal, and I was mentioning game-winning goals, Steele. How about 85 game winners for Stammer just in the regular season? And guess where he's even better? The playoffs. So this team is now built as a winner. Let me just close it out, though. I really do love Juuse Saros. I think it's going to be a big year for him. Not to tip my hand, but all of these moves, and I was already expecting a bounce back. Saros at 29 years old, in his prime, I'm looking at this goaltender hard, Steele. I hope you don't pooch him off my table, but he is going to be, if not my number one target, my number 1B option. I think it's a big, big year on tap for Saros, and obviously the entire team. That's an easy take, though.
It is an easy take, and Juuse Saros brings so much to the fantasy realm right now. Like I said, he is the second best fantasy option goaltender-wise, in my opinion, right there behind Connor Hellebuck. And again,
He's up there.
We're going to have to get to our top 15 fantasy goaltender episodes sooner than later.
For sanity.
We're going to have to do it just for our sanity. But Juuse Saros, again, I'm putting a little bit more emphasis right now on the offensive production and the peripheral stats of what defensemen and forwards can bring to the table fantasy-wise. And I said this before, but I really just like waiting at least until the third or fourth round to draft my goaltender. That's why I'm leaving goaltenders a little bit down on my list. But Juuse Saros could easily go above Steven Stamkos, and rightfully so for what this means for his fantasy value moving forward. Bringing in Brady Skjei, Roman Josi, of course, the guys they've got on the blue line, helping in front of them, Alexander Carrier, Jeremy Lauzon, Luke Shen, doing what they do best, and boxing out in front of Juuse Saros and protecting him as much as possible. But you bring in all those guys in the offseason, it's just bound to help his production as well in the blue paint. So Juuse Saros comes in at number 4 for me. Steven Stamkos is putting a little bit more emphasis personally for the offensive production. But, I mean, we've got the same 4 guys, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have the 5th guy here the exact same.
Let's talk about him right after the break, along with my sleeper target, breakout target. Let me just wrap it up on Stammer like this. In 128 postseason games in his career, 101 points. Stop it right now. I'm not here for the Stammer slander that I've heard. He's far too good. He is one of those guys, Steele, that when you watch him shoot the puck, you're just jealous. That's how good he can really fire that thing. Because, man, if I could shoot the puck like that, if I had the wheels and a whole lot of other ifs, I would have had a shot, baby. But anyway, Stammer, I think it's going to be a big year. I understand the no Braden Point, the Kucherov. I understand, and a new city. Those are some intangibles that obviously could lead to a dip in production. I personally don't see it, although I get the angle. Let's cover a few more of those in a minute. I think we both have the same number 5, but I really want your take on my breakout target and my sleeper.
Excited to continue the conversation. I know we both got this guy, this player, this new addition to the Predators squad at number 5. Conn Smythe Trophy winner, Stanley Cup Trophy winner. You know who we're talking about, but we'll save that for after the break. So much to talk about and more coming up next. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Hit that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Make sure you go check out Locked On Sports today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. They're here for you 24/7 with the top and brightest stories in the sports realm. You can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. The team that we're talking about on today's episode are the Nashville Predators. Coming in at number 5, say it with me, Flip, Jonathan
Brady Skjei.
Marchessault.
No,
Brady Skjei, of course. Yeah, Jonathan Marchessault, Conn Smythe winner, Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights. Brings so much potential to this team offensively. 69 points in 82 games last year. Second career best for Jonathan Marchessault. This is, I mean, take away the COVID year where he only played 55, or there were only 55, 56 games in the year. He's had 8 straight seasons of above 230 plus shots on goal. The peripherals speak for themselves as well. 107 hits last year, 23 blocks. He brings so much to the table in such a good role as well. I mean, he's just been doing it all for now 6 straight years. Jonathan Marchessault is going to be one of those guys that I also believe will fall down the board just because I think people are going to forget about him. I think he falls perfectly into that 6th round area. That's exactly where I would be looking at Jonathan Marchessault, maybe even a little bit higher than the 6th round, late 5th round for Jonathan Marchessault. But just like we've talked about with the Colorado Avalanche and the Tampa Bay Lightning, I mean, there's a lot of guys who are going to get taken in a round after another. So, you know, Roman Josi goes first, then Filip Forsberg in the next round, Steven Stamkos in the next round, Juuse Saros, and then you're going to see at least one Nashville Predator taken in each round from the second round all the way to the sixth, maybe even the seventh too.
Yeah, and that just means these teams are good. And we love saying fantasy gold mine, but the one thing I would point out, about this team is last year, the special teams. Andrew Brunette is a relatively new coach. I'm not ever going to blame everything on a coach. However, there's pressure on now in Nashville to win. So I'm not saying there's a short leash on him or anything like that. But when you get this much talent in, the pressure's on the coach. And that's why I'm looking at these special teams, Steele. They weren't good enough last year. How long did we talk about special teams and playoff teams? All of the best ones are in the postseason. So when you're sitting at 16th best on the PP, 21%, not good enough. And then you flip over to the penalty kill. I believe they were even worse. 22nd in the NHL on the PK. So, you got to think a guy like Marchessault and Brady Skjei, that's going to help both, I think, the offense and the back end. However, both of those have to be better. Just because new players come in doesn't mean you just get handed the keys to the cup, Steele. And Jonathan Marchessault at number 5 makes sense to me. 40-goal scorer, 30 goals a couple of years ago. Maybe 42 is a little bit high for what you can expect this season. However, I could see 30 right in his wheelhouse, 30-goal scorers, very valuable fantasy pieces. Speaking of which, Steele, when you look at these line deployments, and we know that this is early, but right now it's looking like Stammer, Marchessault, and Tommy Novak in the middle. So, sleeper, Tommy Novak. If he gets a long look with those two players, you can't help but feel, Steele, that a guy who no one's really ever talked about except for more dedicated fantasy hockey circles, 45 points in 71 games last year is nothing to shake a stick at. And then you throw him in between two absolute studs in Marchessault and Stammer. At 27 years old, I'm looking at a big opportunity for this kid. And as my breakout target, I had to come on here and talk about Luke Evangelista. I don't know where he fits into the top 6 because there's not a ton of minutes to go around up there. So that might hinder his ability because last year he only got 13 minutes of ice time and change, almost 14. So it might be a year early on the breakout. But I'm looking at both Evangelista and Novak as some more under the radar. Maybe I should just call them both sleepers, Steele. But given how good the rest of this team is going to be, if either of those guys catch any secondary power play time, I like this take even more. But in deeper leagues, Novak and Evangelista at 40 to 50 point guys, very valuable.
Tommy Novak for sure. I got it that time. Mute button doesn't get me the second time around, but Tommy Novak for sure. I mean, you're going to be playing between, like we said multiple times, Conn Smythe winner, Jonathan Marchessault, Stanley Cup winner, as well as 2-time Stanley Cup winner, and Rocket Richard Trophy winner, Steven Stamkos. This is going to be huge for his deployment as well as his production in the offensive zone. Back-to-back years of 40-plus points. Obviously, the point per game dipped quite a bit, actually, this past year, where he had 43 points in 51 games and then actually just 45 points in 71 games. So, obviously struggled a little bit at times with some inconsistency in his game, but now playing with two absolute studs in Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault, being that second line center. I mean, there's not really a third option. I mean, maybe Colton Sissons pops in there every once in a while. I seriously doubt it unless something really bad happens or he's just not producing with them. Other than that, Tommy Novak's going to be that second line center in between those guys. I'm also looking at Brady Skjei. Also you could throw in Gustav Nyquist, obviously overachieved a lot last year. Ryan O'Reilly was a sleeper pick last season where he fell down the draft board. But Brady Skjei, I think, is going to bring a lot to this defensive group for the Nashville Predators. Career year, 47 points in 80 games, 90 blocks, 69 hits, 185 shots. That's 3 straight seasons now of 180 plus shots on the team he was playing with. He's a very durable defenseman. He's only missed 2 games in the last 3 years in the regular season. So he's going to be in the lineup for you almost every single game. And again, after a career year with the Carolina Hurricanes, now getting into the mix with the Nashville Predators, everyone that they brought in, plus Filip Forsberg, plus Roman Josi, plus the guys we all just mentioned, I think it's going to be even better for Brady Skjei. I could see 50 plus points easily for Brady Skjei with what's going on and what the Nashville Predators have cooked easily. Because look, he's going to be playing with Roman Josi on that top D pairing.
You're high on this player. Stick to your guns,
I'm high
pal.
on this player. Stick on the gun. Look, I'm not saying draft him high because he's still going to be, a late to mid round pick in the draft board. I mean, he finished 150th on the fantasy ranking last season. So, I mean, I believe that's somewhere around the 11th or 12th round.
Yeah, he should go a little higher, I'd say.
I'm looking at taking him probably around the 9th or early 10th round. That's where I'm looking at Brady Skjei. I think that's more than fair, more than reasonable for this player. But I have high expectations for this Nashville team. High expectations for Steven Stamkos to continue his dominance in the offensive zone. Don't slump whatsoever, as well as Brady Skjei and Jonathan Marchessault to absolutely fire on all cylinders with their new squad.
I'm already getting fired up for puck drop, and we're not even into August yet, Steele. So there's that. And there's also the fact that nothing is handed to you in sports. And as much as they brought in a bunch of new faces, like I said before, chemistry is real. This was still a bubble team last year, and they're still got to deal with the Dallas Stars and Colorado Avalanche in that division. And we're not talking about an improved Blackhawks team. We're not talking about what's going on with Minnie. The Blues were right on their heels. So if you're seeing Stars and Avs as those first two spots, that doesn't leave a whole lot of room in the Central. So they are going to have to bring it, and nothing gets handed to you. However, a bunch more fire episodes going to get handed to y'all the rest of the week.
Rest of the week, we are absolutely cooking, breaking down all the teams in the NHL, top 5 fantasy assets going into next season. That's what's coming up throughout the week. We'll figure out which teams we're going to be doing on the next couple of episodes, but be prepared for all the hockey content you can use fantasy-wise. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first every single day. Once again, go check out Locked On Sports Day's YouTube channel, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. They're here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On. You can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day out there. Good luck with all your summer bets, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.